Welcome to Point Blank TV. I'm Carly and we are sat in the studio of the king of UK garage, MJ Cole.
I was kind of new to the whole garage thing. When I started making records, started going out to the clubs, and it was kind of mad to hear records that I'd made in the studio with other people or whatever. And quite often they were DJs, so I'd go out and kind of hear them play, and they'd play whatever we'd made in the studio, like on a dub plate, basically. It wasn't so much festivals or raves or anything like that. The first stuff that I was going to was Powerhouse in Tottenham and over at the Aquarium, you know, just various kind of smaller clubs around London, obviously like Twice as Nice and stuff like that going on, and events at the Coliseum. It was quite a sort of mixed crowd. It was a little bit edgy. It goes back to this kind of cheekiness. There was a sort of, you know, had to be on your toes kind of feeling to it. There was sort of, you know, it was all champagne and shiny shoes and stuff like that, but it was quite edgy, basically. It didn't feel like a sort of staid, safe place to be, but that was great. It made it exciting as well, and the music was changing so quickly. To me, garage music is a UK music really born out of drum and bass, the emergence of dance music in the late 80s, a kind of very London-centric sound. It's kind of a cliche, but you know, the B-sides are some of the US garage stuff that was going on, kind of MK and people like that. To me, there was always drum and bass going on, which I was really heavily into, or jungle as it was called at the time, hardcore, and then jungle, and there'd always be a, you know, drum and bass room, jungle room, and then there'd be like a garage room that was kind of a bit more for the ladies. It grew out of this whole mash of stuff that was happening in the late 80s, early 90s, where it was just, you know, you'd hear like kick drums going through stuff, there'd be samples, it would be, you know, little sampled vocals, and it was a complete mishmash, and there'd be like hip house, so bits of hip hop mixed in, and there'd be like London hip hop stuff. So I think garage kind of found its own little niche, you know, coming out of those kind of times. So for me, it was like early 90s really. I wasn't really into it at all. I was always in the jungle room, always. Some of my friends, you know, kind of knew people who went to the garage room. They was kind of dressed up a bit differently and stuff, but we were just there in like champion tops, sweaty with like, you know, just trainers, and that was it, basically. So garage. How would I characterise it? Around 130 BPM. The most characteristic thing is the skip, the quantize, the swing. It's generally kind of triplets. On Cubase, on the Atari, it was always 16T, so it's not straight 16ths, it's actually triplets, basically. So you get a rather than it's, and that's the main kind of template behind it. It does vary a bit, but really garage has got a skip to it, which is the kind of foundation. Rhythmically, a lot of pushes. In a two-step thing, it might boom, there's these pushes kind of before the third beat, and you find that in the hi-hats as well a lot. In terms of sounds and stuff, it was very sample based at the beginning, so my Akai samplers behind me, I made Sincere on that actually in my bedroom. Sampling tiny little drums, sampling bass sounds, so they all had kind of a bit of character to them, like a bit of vinyl noise on them. People didn't kind of, you know, cut the start points exactly properly on their samplers, so you kind of end up getting a swing in the groove that you didn't necessarily intend there to be there. I remember my first sample I had with the Cheetah SX16, I think it was, one tiny little, one new thing. It had 2.5 second sampling time. And vocals really, I think, you know, in drum and bass and jungle, it wasn't, that was kind of very bass heavy thing. In garage, suddenly it became, lent itself very easily to vocals. Sampled vocals like, you know, Tina Moore, Never Let It Go, things like that. They were just kind of like tiny little vocal samples, but it kind of fitted in very well. Slightly sassy, mostly female vocals. And then a lot of it came from the vocals, a lot of them came from things that were slower. So R&B stuff basically. So we were just kind of time stretching it. Something might be 90 BPM, the vocal we've got, and we time stretch it to 130. So you get this energy concertinaing effect of kind of compressing all that energy within the vocal into a shorter space. So all the samples and vocals had a kind of energy to them because they'd been squashed in and concertinaed in. That's kind of a big characteristic of it as well. That would be it really. For me, mainly the thing is the skip and the cheekiness of it as well. It's not like a house genre where it's all very big room and it's very linear and things build up and things happen quite slowly in a majestic way. Garage was very bumpy and chuck this in, there'd be a tiny little fill here and then we'd switch to a different section and there'd be a little drum roll and, you know, very kind of cheeky and snappy and skippy. So I got into garage really via the studio. I kind of grew up, obviously everyone knows, playing classical music. I got into going out basically in 88, 89, those kind of times, and discovered kind of dance music and going out and going to clubs and going to raves and stuff like that. But at the same time at home, I was obviously very musical, moderately musical person growing up. I got into kind of trying to make music on computers, like the, you know, very early computers, Ataris and Amigas and things like that. So be kind of playing games and it's like, all right, there's a music program, that's interesting, you know, kind of have a go on that. So really that was going on in my bedroom and I got into the studio sides of things. And I'm kind of, you know, a bit of a tech freak as well. I always had been as a kid. So I got into kind of trying to make music at home. And then I ended up going to college and studying a lot of engineering stuff and getting really, I got into the idea that I want to be an engineer. I want to be a record producer, but in the more traditional sense. So I kind of want to be a George Martin or someone like that. I want to be producing in big studios, big bands, leather trousers, a fruit bowl, sushi, the whole lot. You know, I kind of really got into SSL engineering, which is like engineering on massive desks, and you know, I read the manual cover to cover, and in my early 20s, sort of mid-20s, early 20s, I became quite a good SSL engineer, and I was doing day work all around London, loads of different studios, recording stuff, mixing things for major labels, kind of doing sessions like that. So I was kind of on the road to doing that. My love still was jungle and kind of drum and bass outside classical music. And then I kind of didn't end up going down the traditional, you know, leather trousers route of being a producer. I ended up going to work for a label called Sour, a very small kind of drum and bass label. I kind of followed my love for that music and took a smaller job at a smaller place. So I ended up engineering for them, doing sessions, and then they teamed together with a pirate radio station called London Underground, and they had started a second studio in Dalston in Kingston Road. And part of my engineering kind of duties as an everyday engineer was kind of doing sessions with some of these guys who were pirate DJs on that station, which was Garage Station. So I suddenly was introduced to these guys coming in, bringing their record box, playing me all this garage stuff that I'd never really heard before, and me trying to kind of make records with them. So I started sampling little bits of that, trying to kind of copy the feel of garage records that I could hear. And I really got into it. I kind of suddenly found that I had an affinity for kind of making this music. Suddenly there was space for me to suddenly I can play chords and do kind of melodic things, which I'd always tried to get into my drum and bass attempts at home, but they always got a little bit too musical. It was never kind of sparse and hard enough. And suddenly there was a bit of a revelation that suddenly I was like, wow, I'm really good at doing this, and it's something that I'm going to be good at. So I kind of felt this affinity for it immediately. And then I think my style sort of developed in a sort of unique-ish way because I had no knowledge of that music at all. I'd never grown up loving garage and knowing a lot about these records. I literally was a guy in the studio kind of engineering, and suddenly these sessions came in and it was my interpretation of what I was hearing. So that's how I really got into garage, and then I started making a lot more records, a lot of records with all these guys from London Underground, like kind of all the VIP lots, so like, you know, Ramsey and Fenn and you know, Daryl B and Hermit and Danny Ward and Naughty Be Nice and all these kind of early VIP records were the ones that was me kind of finding my sound in garage. So that's really how I got into garage. It was kind of through the studio and not so much kind of through knowing about the music. I remember when I made Crazy Love, and actually I was playing at Bagley's that's in King's Cross, which has kind of been converted into, you know, offices and shops at the moment. Good job, by the way, I think. I remember going into there, and I think it was in room 2. There were like 3 rooms next door to each other, but the DJ booth was right at the top, so it was absolutely boiling. It was literally like you're up at the ceiling. And if it was hot downstairs there, it was absolutely mental up there. And I remember I'd made Crazy Love, and it was done. I had it on a dub plate, but I didn't even want to play it because I kind of thought already that the tunes felt old very, very quickly. Like if you'd made something, I reckon I'd play it for probably, you know, 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. Even if it was something that was really popular, you just kind of stopped playing it. So it all moved on really, really quickly. And if something kind of went off and became popular in the charts, you just wouldn't play it anymore. There was a great kind of dub plate cutting culture that was going on. We used to meet down at Freddie Fresh Plates at JTS on Friday mornings. Like Dream Team would be there, Matt Jam and Carl Brown would be there, you know, Jason Kay, and we'd all kind of, you know, I'd turn up on my scooter in my kind of all-in-one scooter thing, my little scooter box with my box of DATs, because I'd been working with loads of different people. It was kind of like, Matt, can I get a little rub of that? Because you hold on to that. It's like, yeah, you can have one, and then you kind of swap stuff. It was great like that. It was a really kind of tight little scene and very fast moving as well. Just loads of tunes getting made all the time. I guess people just had a thirst for it, right? They got bored of things quickly and there was things being made. I'd kind of hear someone make something new and I'd be like, you know, it kind of annoyed me that it was so good, and that kind of spurred me on. This is like the best way for a musician. You never kind of just like, yeah, I made a good track a few months ago and just kind of relax. It was like, I've just heard that on whoever's pirate show, or I just went to a club and it's like, what's that? And it'd be a dub plate and it'd be like, right, he's kind of done that and he's kind of taken the 2-step thing and done that, or this is kind of 4/4. It's got getting all bassy out there at the moment, then you try and make something. It was just really exciting. We were all super young. We're like early 20s, mid 20s. And it was just fun. Everyone driving around their cars, pirate stuff coming out the windows, you know, pirate radio, people moving antennas everywhere, shows getting cancelled, you know, raves popping up here and there, different club things. It was a good time, it was mad. And this was kind of before the time that the MC thing started. I kind of liked it then, really. That was cool. There were always these sort of waves of things coming in, like, I remember Ramsey saying, well, I'm not playing that wop stuff, you know, which basically would be like bassy things. He liked it kind of bubbling on a kind of more vocal way, fair play. There were these meetings kind of called amongst all the DJs, you know, trying to get everyone to stop playing the more bassy wop stuff. There'd be this kind of consensus that, hey, you've got to stop playing that stuff because it's all getting a bit too dark, and, you know, the ladies are leaving the raves and it's all getting a bit too kind of, you know, macho and bloke heavy, basically. 3 records from the kind of the time garage was in its formation. So I think Roy Davis Jr., Gabrielle, has got to be one of the ones. I don't think he was like, I'm going to make a garage record. It just popped out, but it became so garage, you know. I think R.I.P. Groove was probably like a pretty big record. It did kind of cross over and become commercial, but it started out very, very underground. Stephen Emmanuel, Colours, something like that. It's just had a really kind of amazing sort of garage, sort of colourful, sampled feel to it. Yeah, I'd say those 2. So alongside the commercial garagey bits and people kind of, you know, signing their stuff to major labels, there was, you know, some more kind of MC stuff started to come through. And I think that became interesting on an underground level again. It was suddenly something new. It's very fast changing. They'd always been chatting on garage sets. There'd always been kind of guys on the mic, but they'd always been kind of ancillary really to the records that are being made, but suddenly they started to kind of make their own records, and then there'd be crews of them together, and then we started to get the So Solid thing coming through, and that's really when the dances got a little bit darker. There started being trouble at places, you know, there were kind of shootings, and suddenly like the police were shutting things down, or you DJ'd certain places and you know, you need to kind of fill out a form and show ID and send it to the police before you even went to play there. It was the beginning of grime, basically. You know, those MCs kind of making records, and grime kind of went on where garage kind of started waning. I remember going to Uptown Records and in Darblade Street, where Black Market was back in those days in Soho, and they had like sub-genres in the shop, and there would be like vertical racks of records. But they must have had probably about 12 different sub-genres: 4/4 garage, vocal garage. Within grime there was kind of, you know, there was like sub-low, 8-bar, all these different kind of sub-genres. It suddenly kind of went a bit mad. It was still very divided in terms of genres and stuff. But the whole grime thing as we know it now, yeah, definitely came out of the garage thing, and it kind of, it's, you know, survived through today. We still got drum and bass. All these genres kind of, it's like they have an eruption at the beginning and then they get killed off and suddenly they're not flavour of the month, and then they slowly re-emerge to be actual like pillars of the musical community. So drum and bass, solid now. You know, house is kind of different because it was always there from the beginning. But drum and bass, grime, garage, and I hope that dubstep is comes back into focus a little bit more, but in a cool way, because that for me was an amazing genre. But I think dubstep went exactly the same way as garage. You know, I remember you know, being nominated for the Mercury Prize, like touring around the world, you know, getting flown to LA to work with like Mariah Carey on remixes, and having Jill Scott in the studio and doing like TLC remixes, and you know, all these kind of major things, and winning like, you know, awards and going to everything, to it being nothing within about a year. In 2003, when my second album just managed to squeeze out, garage became a completely dirty word. No one wanted to mention it. There'd be no events going on or anything. It's kind of hard to imagine now, because I think now it's come back as more of a, oh, garage is cool, yeah, it's this thing and it's this style, and it's become a pillar of the musical community. But I think the same thing happened to dubstep. It went mental and everything was dubstep, and now no one really mentions that word anymore. Hopefully that will come back, and that will be one of these pillars that I keep talking about. So I think kind of before 2000, probably before about 99, something like that, it was fairly underground, and it was all just bumping around to small labels. It started to get more commercial around, yeah, 98, 99, definitely from 2000. I made Sincere in my bedroom on that sampler back there in, I think it was 97, I probably did, and it was still kind of underground then. It was Pete Tong who really kind of found that record first. I ended up signing it to Simon Dunmore, who was at AMPM then, the guy who's defected now. That was kind of quite a formative time for me. I made some good tunes at that time. But that's when it started to get a bit commercial. Artful Dodger popped up, and they were kind of doing some amazing records, Moving Too Fast, the Ramona Johnson thing, and Locked On Records started to get a bit more kind of mainstream. It started to hop around kind of 98, 99, people started getting signed everywhere, and suddenly the majors were all interested and people signing album deals. More commercial side, it was definitely Artful Dodger, you know, Wookie was doing stuff. I'd kind of signed an album deal to Paul Martin and Giles Peterson at Talking Loud, which was like amazing for me, like a perfect place to be. There was just a whole plethora of kind of commercialism going on at that time, and it got so big so fast that really it was its own worst enemy in a way. I think I've kind of seen that happen with other genres since. It's interesting that they get so bigged up and suddenly everyone's like, this is the new thing, and everything is about that it's a victim of its own success in a way. But those years, the golden years for people hoovering up record deals and stuff, would be around 2000, I'd say. And by 2003, like, it's gone. I certainly hear the garage influence in lots of different music that's around now, like the Disclosure Boys certainly have got that kind of skip, and they've smashed it, they've taken it to kind of stadium level with their live stuff and that. And I guess to an extent, you know, people like Subtract. There's DJs that still love garage as well, like One Man, you kind of follow his Insta thing, he's got a wicked collection of stuff I've never heard on vinyl. He's totally into it. And Jimmy Napes that I work with, the guy who co-wrote all the Sam Smith stuff and did the Bond theme tune stuff. I write with him all the time, but he's a garage lunatic. He loves it. I mean, he comes in here, one of the biggest songwriters in the world, and all he wants to do is stand over there and play garage records, basically. He's a legend. So yeah, there's a lot of love for garage, definitely, these days. And it's kind of a bit weird for me because it went all a bit dark and suddenly it was like, don't mention that. And I was like, oh right, I'm going to learn to play guitar and I need to get into a band and, you know, forget about that era. But now it's kind of quite nice. It seems like people have got respect for it as something that happened, that's something that's influenced everything else that's around at the moment. I've got a great respect for the past and, you know, everything that happened, but I kind of sort of really feel that's happened and I'm kind of proud that I was kind of part of that scene and it's all encapsulated. I'm not really interested in reliving it, it's kind of been done, so I'm really all about, you know, the future and what's going on at the moment. But same as, you know, the way I grew up playing piano and practicing every day, all of that is in every bit of music that I do these days. And the same with kind of those early years in garage and me engineering in studios, like everything, every experience you have and every track you try and little trick you try permeates into the music that you're making, you know, currently. And now I kind of feel like as a musician I can really draw on loads of different things. I can draw on my piano, I can kind of draw on my classical music experience, but I can also draw on the, you know, cutting up samples and kind of going out to clubs and, you know, kind of roughing it up a little bit and kind of being on the street. So I think the stuff I'm doing now, I'm doing a much bigger body of work at the moment. I kind of found a really good groove at the moment. I'm kind of doing a lot of songwriting with different people and I've kind of started revisiting the garage sound, but just it feels like a continuation of the love that I had from it from the beginning, but in a studio kind of way, the kind of whole two-step thing and the way it lends itself to songwriting and kind of chords and stuff like that. In the early days, it was all just not chance, but it was all like ramshackle, like, yeah, let's just get, you know, that girl Sarah in, I think she can sing kind of thing. Now it's all a little bit more like, she's got an amazing vocal, let's get her in, or I've written this song and it's been demoed, so I'm going to try and get whoever else in. It's all different now, everything's sort of streaming and online, but I'm kind of loving that. I think it's really cool the way you can get a record out immediately and it be up on, you know, Spotify, and you can kind of see who's listening to it and stuff like that. But there's definitely the influence of garage, and my having been there at that particular time, it is permeating through everything that I'm doing. In the next video, I'm going to be showing you how to knock together a quick track, and I'm going to be using the samples from my forthcoming Loop Masters pack. So just knocking up some drums, putting something together in a very short space of time, just so you can see how I knock stuff up and put things together.
Do it. Be sincere. I'm crazy. Don't do it. Be sincere. Be sincere.
I've been hearing that for so long, you know. Yeah, because it's like coming back, isn't it? It's like garage things. So, well, I don't know, is it? It's like.